This is Cashology by FNBO, a podcast devoted to the art and science of managing your money. It's like school, but your only homework is living your best financial life. Class is now in session. Chances are you've noticed prices going up at the gas pump, at the grocery store, whether you're shopping for clothes or for a new home. The price of everything seems to just be going up, up, up. Well, experts predict that the rate of inflation will slow down. That doesn't mean prices will ever come back down. So, what are some smart ways of coping with inflation? That's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome, and thanks for listening to the Cashology Podcast, hosted by your guide on the path to financial savvy, me, Julie Wyans. I am very happy to welcome back our guest today, Dustin Elkins. Hi, Dustin.
Hi, Julie. Thanks so much for having me back on.
Dustin is in our fraud operations department, but he was also our guest back in Credit Card 101 episode. If you want to go back and give a listen to that one, he was our guest when he was a personal banker and has recently been promoted. So congratulations, Dustin.
Thank you, Julie. I'm really enjoying the new role and still get to see kind of the personal banking side of it, just in a different set of eyes this time. It's very fun.
Awesome. Well, you have a wealth of knowledge, especially when it comes to helping our listeners navigate through some difficult financial topics like inflation. Honestly, I feel like I'm bogged down and feel a little blue about inflation. It seems like everything is so much more expensive. My budget is different now, and I know that our listeners feel the same way. But before we dive into the topic, I want to remind everyone to subscribe to the Cashology Podcast. If you haven't already, you can get alerts for when future episodes are going live.
Thanks, Julie. We'd like to inform our contestants and studio audience the rules of today's game. Let's see what they've won. Investment products are not FDIC insured, not a deposit or other obligation of the bank, not insured by any federal government agency, not guaranteed by the bank, may lose value. This podcast should not be copied or reproduced without permission. Information and statements within this podcast are subject to change without notice. The Cashology Podcast is for informational purposes only and is not intended to constitute investment advice or recommendations. First National Bank of Omaha does not make any representation or warranty as to the accuracy or completeness of any information or statements within this podcast. When making decisions about your financial situation, consult a financial professional for advice. Podcasts are not regularly updated, and information may become outdated. Deposit products are offered by First National Bank of Omaha, member FDIC, equal housing lender. The Cashology Podcast, copyright First National Bank of Omaha. Back to you, Julie.
So, Dustin, let's talk about coping with inflation. I mentioned that I feel blue. I know a lot of our listeners feel blue. Talk to us. Help us.
Definitely. I know I'm feeling that same way now. Inflation is one of those things that's unfortunately kind of out of your control. You know, if you go to the grocery store, you see higher prices. There's not really anything you can do about that. You know, higher prices at the gas pump. You have to get gas in your car. It's an interesting time. And I think, you know, it's definitely important you have to be kind of on your toes with inflation. You have to be ready for it and adjust your budget and be able to look at how you're spending and where you can cut back on to help save up basically for the more pricier items you see everywhere.
So what tips do you have to start with navigating through and working through your budget?
One thing I know that I did recently is I sat down and I took a look at my basically monthly statement, saw where I was spending money. I looked for any like reoccurring billing that I had that maybe I'm not using anymore, or any services I can just get rid of just to help myself save that much extra money. You know, and just trying to be a smart shopper when you're shopping for products. Sometimes you can still even find sales. Some stores have overstock on certain items. So there's certain things that prices are a little bit lower on that you can take advantage of now. But, you know, really just evaluating your monthly budget and seeing where you can make some small cuts just to help make it a little bit easier and give yourself more of a cushion.
That is such great advice, Dustin. You know, I do the same thing. I have an Excel doc with my monthly expenses, and I go back and look at it and make sure that I'm aligning with what I expected. And honestly, I'm a culprit of impulse shopping, you know, and I think a lot of people are, where if I want something, I get it. And sometimes I don't do the best job of shopping around for the best price of that item. So I really appreciate that you said that, because if I wanted a new pair of sunglasses or something, I could probably get the same look, same exact parameters of what the sunglasses are for a lot cheaper if I just kind of took a moment, took a breath, and didn't impulse buy the glasses at the register online. One thing you said that I thought was really interesting is you looked through past reoccurring expenses. That is such a critical step in this because so often merchants and retailers make it easy for us to add our cards in their digital wallets. And while that is great for expenses that are critical or necessary or something you utilize frequently, for things that you may have forgotten about, a $5 bill every month adds up if you have a few of those, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And especially right now, just as an example, chicken prices were up around roughly 9%, which, if you're not getting too much, it shouldn't be too big of a difference in price. But that $5 a month, that if you do cancel that membership, save that $5, it could just, go to that. It's unfortunate that it is going to sometimes a higher priced item. But again, it's out of our control. And if, you still need to get those groceries. So, saving any amount of dollars that you can a month is absolutely helpful. And even if you're saving too much by accident, then you have some extra money to throw into your savings account.
Let's talk about savings and some advice you have there when dealing with inflation and still managing a thorough and robust savings system.
Absolutely. It's definitely very important to make sure that your emergency savings, that money you're setting aside just in case, is also keeping up with inflation. Savings accounts rates, the rate right now for most banks is lower than the rate of inflation. And so it's important to keep up with inflation. If you're not earning enough interest from your savings accounts, then really you're losing purchasing power because your savings isn't gaining more interest compared to the rate of inflation that we're seeing right now.
That is great. We want to keep some money accessible, right, for an emergency fund. And I think we recommend about 2 months there. But a majority of your cash, we would say, right, should sit somewhere that you're yielding some sort of return combating this inflation. Because if your cash is just sitting there and you're not earning interest off of it, then you're losing value every day.
Yeah, definitely. And there are some ways to beat that and to get around it. And a way is to take some of your money once you have your emergency savings built, take some of that money and try to go ahead and invest it. Sometimes through investments, you can get a better rate of return than you can in your savings account. Obviously, there is risk involved with investments, and that's a good conversation to have with the financial advisor. But that's a good way to get around it. There are, the Treasury of the United States does offer certain bonds that will follow, the inflation, the inflation rate. And so those rates go up as the inflation rate goes up. So that could be a way to get around it. Or of course, you have brokerage accounts, education accounts, and other retirement accounts where you could gain a little bit of a better rate and, try to beat out that inflation rate a little bit. So that way you're earning some money still.
Great advice. So talking a little bit about practicalities, some items, harkening back to our conversation about extra spending, you can look at your car insurance, your home insurance, talk about rates with your insurance companies, try to get them minimized. Because like Dustin said, the price of chicken's gone up 9%. So if your cost of chicken's gone up 9% and you're paying a few extra dollars there, try to get a few extra dollars saved on other items that you can maybe, argue to get lower, right? Because you're a good driver, because you've been with a company for a certain amount of time. The other opportunity is if you have cable or internet, maybe downsize a bit. Downsizing in general of the services you pay for could be an opportunity to save cash. The other piece of this that we wanted to talk through was making cash. There's an episode that is about side hustles that we're producing that will help make some additional discretionary income for you. However, if you have a job today, maybe asking your employer for a raise, right, of income. So Dustin, do you have any tips there?
Yeah, absolutely. Right now is a good time. Employers are, desperately trying to hold on to their good employees. I know personally for me, I live in Colorado and I see a lot of, help wanted signs, we're hiring signs that I've seen up for quite a while. So, you as a worker definitely do have a little bit more leverage with your employer to try to, see, how can I work myself into a promotion or work myself to getting a raise? If you show them that you want to do that and, you have that determination and you want to stay with that company and, just trying to get that getting a better payment from your employer monthly, that'll obviously help you with inflation right now.
Absolutely. So I think the biggest thing Dustin and I want to impart on listeners today is hope is not lost. Inflation can be very scary, but there are ways to combat the feeling of hopelessness that you may be feeling. And looking at how to cut back on expenses, seeing how to raise your income, and just having a smart way of managing your money where you're earning interest on it are just some of the tips that we've gone over today. Dustin, is there anything else you wanted to add?
Only thing that I would add right now is, sometimes in response to inflation, the Federal Reserve has a tool basically to raise the prime lending rate, which does in turn raise like your variable interest rate. So if you have a credit card, chances are your interest rate on your credit card went up, which is going to make your payments go up and you're going to be paying more in interest to those banks. So another strategy I know that I'm using that I've heard before too is, trying to pay off your variable interest rate cards because like I said, chances are you're paying more in interest there. So if you can, pay those off a little bit earlier and save yourself that much more in interest, that just gives you some more free money too.
Excellent tip, Dustin. You are incredible. And again, if anyone wants to listen more about credit card management, go to our episode Credit Card 101 where Dustin is our guest. Thank you so much, Dustin, for joining us today.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me on again. It's always a really good time to get on and talk about what's happening, basically.
It's perfect. Well, thank you everyone for listening. If you're curious to learn more about how to manage your money better, want to chat with a personal banker, feel free to go to FNBO.com and schedule an appointment or just walk into any branch and they would be happy to help you. You are not in this alone and we would love to be there through your financial journey. And don't forget to subscribe to future episodes of the Cashology Podcast. Thanks for listening.